Hello, this is Brett from SurvivalComms.
Today we're going to talk about scanning receivers and how they'll be useful for you. This is going to be a multi-part series, and this one's going to deal mostly with the scanning receivers themselves, and we're going to kind of take a trip through history here, and we'll feature some of the radios from my own collection in operation. Essentially, this video is going to be about scanning before the internet, and it's going to take us to the advent of trunking, and we're going to talk about more modern scanning receivers in a future video. Traditional scanning receivers are VHF and UHF. They receive on FM frequency modulation. They're set up in a channelized fashion, meaning that the specific RF frequencies within the receiver are set up in channels and not through a variable frequency oscillator to allow step-through tuning. They're either in a crystal format, which the crystals are as such here, and these are installed in the radio, and each crystal is cut for a specific frequency, or they're synthesized, which meaning we can enter in the frequency of interest on a keypad and receive it. They do, essentially they scan, which is nothing more than rapidly hopping through the channels, and once the radio receives a signal on one of the frequencies of interest, it stops, it receives that radio traffic, and then continues to scan. And typically they go from channel 1, in this example here, to channel 4, channel 1 to channel 4, channel 1 to channel 4, and so on and so forth. Our first FM receiver here isn't really a scanner, but it's a single channel crystal controlled FM receiver, and this is a Motorola alert monitor, and these were used by fire departments and ambulance crews, and what they were meant to do is actually stay in a fixed location and receive a signal with a matching two-tone signaling protocol, which at the time was like quick call, and the radio receiver would remain squelched. It would receive the signal, the two-tone signaling, and it would automatically unsquelch the radio, pass the traffic. When the individual or the unit responded, they would just go ahead and hit the reset switch. This particular model is a VHF high band model, and it's still completely functional.
Test 1 2 3 4 5 5 4 3 2 1.
Early scanners were crystal controlled, meaning that they actually had elements in there called crystals that you would have to install into the scanner to determine which frequencies it would operate on. And for example, this one here is capable of low band VHF, high band VHF, and UHF frequencies. And if you look at it right now, it's scanning individually. If you wanted to take a channel out of the rotation, you would merely just use these buttons right here while it's in a scanning mode, or what you would do is you would take and place it in a manual mode, and you could step through the frequencies individually. So there wasn't a whole lot of frequency flexibility with an item like this, but at the time these were extremely popular. This is an example of a crystal controlled handheld scanning receiver. This one here is more of a professional grade than a hobby grade type, and the particular agency that owned this at one time purchased these for personnel that didn't need a two-way radio but still had need to monitor radio traffic. But as you can see, even though it's old, it's still perfectly functional.
Test 5 4 3 2 1 1 2 3 4 5.
Over time, scanners became more advanced and became digital and programmable with the frequency display. So no longer were you slaved to having the crystals. You could actually program the frequency you wanted exactly as you wanted it into the scanner. Another feature of the digital scanners that was nice is the ability to actually search for new frequencies, and this was something that was not available before, of course, just like the direct frequency programming. So for example, if we wanted to go ahead and search between a range of frequencies, like let's say we wanted to start at 146, we'd set our limit, and then we wanted to set an upper limit of 148 megahertz. We'd hit the limit again, and then what we would do is search. And once it found a transmission in there, it would actually stop on that transmission. Scanners such as our 210XL here have soldiered on, and for an individual who's just going to listen to specific analog FM channels, it'll still suffice today. Now, during a period of time I call the transition period, or the golden age of scanning, we had several advancements take place. Most of the scanning receivers started to have AM, and the AM started for civil aviation monitoring purposes, and then your higher end models would actually gain the frequencies for military aircraft. Your capacities became much larger. It became normal to have 100 plus channels. Your scan speeds increased dramatically, and instead of having just one large body of channels, you started to have everything broken up into banks, and this helped the monitor focus his efforts on different areas he would want to listen to. Frequency searching became much more common and almost became a hobby, people looking for different frequencies and stuff using the frequency searching features of their scanning receiver. Coverage in the 800 megahertz band became much more normal, and as that band opened up, so of course the scanning receivers started to provide that kind of coverage. Now at this period of time, the Radio Shack Pro 2006 was the king of scanners, and it's still out there. You can get them. They usually go for about $50 now, and that's a fantastic AM FM scanning receiver if you want to get your hands on one. When you would buy a scanner from Radio Shack, they generally would give you one of these, which is just a printout of the frequencies of interest of the area. And typically these were your public safety frequencies. And, you know, depending on where you were in the country, you would get a different sheet. And typically these were just typed up by an individual that worked at the store, or in this case here, typed up into a word processor and then printed out and Xeroxed. So if the information in here wasn't good enough for you, you would end up having to go with something like this, which is just a book called Police Call, which was put out by Radio Shack, and this one's from 1995, and everything was listed by state. Like, let's say you wanted to find, let's see, Lee County of here, and we wanted to find their SO channels. What we would have to do is we would have to look under Lee County of, and then what we would do is you can see F is fire, L is local government, and then P is police. And you would find their frequencies and their respective call signs, and you would find specific information like the number of mobiles, and then you would look for like the number of mobile relays, which would be the repeaters. But this is how you would gather information. Scanner Master was a really good book here, and it was specific by state, and it had much more stuff in it than just public safety stuff. And you can see here, this is statewide frequencies, and then you could go like this is Alachua County, and you could look at all the call signs and what radio service they were in, and whatever frequencies their repeater output, or whatever frequencies they were licensed for. So, and it had much more detailed information, like under Gainesville here, you'd see the Alachua County SO, and it would actually have their selective signaling protocol. So this was a very good book back when books were the big deal for scanner information before the internet. And of course you had Tom Nitel's book, which basically had your federal frequencies in it, your military channels, and a lot of different information in here. And it wasn't as well laid out as like the Scanner Master publication, but at the time this is a very, very popular book. At the end of the transition period, the majority of monitoring was still public safety oriented. People were still listening to their local police departments and fire departments, etc. And one change brought about a tremendous change in scanning, and that was EDAX and SmartNet. Trunking is nothing more than a system of dynamic voice channel assignment. I'm not going to turn this into a trunking class, but if we look at our theoretical system on the board, here's a 5-channel, 800 megahertz trunking system. And we can see at the top is a control channel. A control channel broadcasts digital data continuously, and each one of these subscriber radios would listen to that. And the two systems represented here, the SmartNet Smart Zone and the EDAX system here on the right, would not be able to talk to each other directly. Although they're very different in operation, they also share some similar characteristics. Essentially what happens is you're taking all of your radio users and your putting them in groups, and those groups are called talk groups. And what happens is as an individual user on the system hits their push to talk button, it goes back to the system requests a talk permit on that certain talk group. All the other radios that are on that talk group at the time, their radios steer to that particular talk group, their squelch opens, and you get a talk permit, and you can go ahead and make your transmission, and then everybody's radio squelches again, and the systems go back to monitoring the control channel. Now, what this means for the individual using a scanner is that these individual users bounce all over these particular 4 voice channels, and they seem to follow no random pattern. And what happens is as you have multiple talk groups on this system, the transmissions are all taking place. So it's basically on a fairly busy system, it becomes a bunch of mumbo jumbo that's very difficult to decipher. The 3 major flavors of trunking at that time were: for Motorola was SmartNet and SmartZone, for General Electric was EDAX, and for EF Johnson was LTR. And LTR works differently than either EDAX or SmartNet, SmartZone. But the first commercially available trunking scanner was a unit in BC235, which only did the Motorola. Later versions like the BC250 would also do EDAX. And as you see over time, these other scanner generations came out, and they actually were capable of handling the newer technologies. And now it's just a continuous upgrading process. What you find is that if you want to stay on the bleeding edge of technology with a scanner, you're going to have to pay for it. So what you need to do is identify what your scanning targets are and how important is the latest trunking technology to your monitoring efforts. I hope you enjoyed this video on scanning before the internet and getting to see some of my older equipment up and running. The next video, of course, we're going to talk about more modern scanners. I felt like the advent of trunking was a good place to leave off at. So I hope this helps. This is Brett from SurvivalComms. Till next time.